Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're talking about dimensional reporting inside of Dynamics 365 Business Central. We're obviously going to be focusing on using PopDoc for said reporting. Hopefully that's what you're all here for. My name is Rod O'Connor. I'm the jack of all trades here at E1 Solutions. I get involved in a number of things. A lot of you may have heard my voice already in other trainings and presentations. If not, hopefully you're still okay. The reason we're talking about dimensional reporting in BC in particular is we have heard from users that it can be difficult. BC is really good at gathering up all this data, but it can be difficult to get back out the dimensional data, especially inside of Business Central. So, I can go to other places and get that reporting, but, how do I get to it in the system I'm choosing to work in? So this is where PopDoc comes into play. Now, I'm not going to be doing a full-on demo of PopDoc today. We have other presentations that do all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to assume, a certain level of knowledge, I guess, as we go through. But what you're seeing is going to be really a lot of standard functionality inside of PopDoc. It's stuff that you can do, for pretty much any connector. We're just talking about one specific use case for PopDoc in this case. So enough chatter and enough intro slide. Let me jump into product and actually start kind of showing you, some of the ways that you can use PopDoc features to get access to your Business Central dimensions. By the way, by way of, kind of general admin, we don't have a question slide at the end of this or anything. In fact, you just saw the one and only slide that I'll be showing you during this little webinar. We do have the chat window open, or I have the chat window open. I have the questions section open. Feel free to throw questions in as we go along. I will do my best to keep an eye on those queues and answer questions as we go through. So I'm going to jump into the main PopDoc widget. You all probably are living in this main widget all day, every day. I'm going to show you a couple of specific lists that we've put in here. We all know this is Skippy. He's reaching into our data source to pull data in real time. I want to jump over to just, my chart of accounts here. I just want to see all my accounts, and, we can always see the account balances here, and, I can add and remove columns and all that jazz. But you might notice we've got a couple of extra details here. So I am going to, first of all, make sure I have all of my accounts. I am going to then find accounts that begin with 61 and my meals and entertainment in particular. Now over here, what we've got is a detail that is drilling down into specific dimensions for each of my accounts. So I can see here, for example, my customer group that are associated with this particular account and what are the amounts that make up this balance of 375. I could take a look at my travel account here and take a look, what makes up that number. I can also take a look at my product dimension and see how this GL account has been broken out this way. Now, again, I haven't left Business Central. I'm not going to a whole other window, but I'm able to see this detail here. Now, I'm showing you within our main widget. I could just as easily have put this dimension information as a widget on the GL account window itself, so that I could now start drilling in and seeing what dimensions are making up that account balance and what's kind of being used. I could take a look at transactions that were, detailed by dimension. In fact, let's go take a look at that list. So I'm going to jump now over to my general ledger entries, and I saved a favorite. This is kind of like one of those moments where you're watching a cooking show and the cook on the TV pulls a pie out of the oven that's already cooked, after having 2 seconds ago put one in. So I'm not going to make you watch me enter all of the queries I did to get the data. But the important note, the important thing to note on here is that we have added our dimension columns as fields. They just showed up here in my list of columns. And now everything that I can do with any column, I can start doing with my dimensions. So I've got my ability to group, and obviously I can have groups within groups if I want to see customers and products blended. I can take a look and see that my medium customers are dealing with more products than anyone else, so on and so forth. So I can really start to kind of get some analyses going on there. Obviously, those are sortable, just like every other column. One thing I like to point out for folks, because we do tend to forget about this, even I, when I'm doing a lot of my demos for potential customers, I do sometimes forget to mention this. All of our lists, including a dimension list, are going to be multi-company by default. So I can pull my data from across organizations. Now, in this case, I don't have any posted dimensionalized entries over in Cronus EU, but if I did, they would be here as well. And all that sorting and grouping, that would work just hunky-dory. Whoops, I want US, not EU. Okay, once again, I can obviously filter on those accounts. So you can see I've got, some filters already in place here to make my favorite work. But if I wanted to, I can come in and I could search on, customer group as a dimension, or department, or, the product one that I showed you earlier. All of these are listed here as fields that I can search against. So you're really not restricted when it comes to dimensions on a standard report from using them just like any other field, which is pretty cool. Okay. So there's a question in the chat, if the dimension is a code, how do you get the dimension value to display? There is, we're showing the codes here. I'm going to show you in a minute when we add the dimensions, how to get the values for them as well. Okay. So one last thing that I like to show while we're in here before we jump into PopDoc and start talking about some of this. Now, everything I've shown you up until now is standard PopDoc functionality. It's included in pretty much every level of licensing, both business and premium. What I'm about to show you is what's called a matrix report. Now, some of you may not be aware of what a matrix report is. It's kind of a more traditional analytical or pre-pivoted type of report that allows you to really kind of summarize, and you've got filters on your columns, filters on your rows, and overall filter on the list. For some of you who are in our middle tier of licensing, this would be an add-on to that license. For anyone who's on the call who is at our premium level, you do own matrix reporting already. Now I'm going to jump into my matrix section here. Now what you can see here is I've got a list of GL accounts that'll be down the left-hand side, and then across the top I've got my various dimension values. In this case I chose product, and I'm getting basically kind of a standard, matrix, a grid of data that is showing this. Will this update with existing PopDoc users? I'm not sure I understand the question there. The dimensional reporting is standard in PopDoc. I'll show you how you're going to add that, and that would be passed across to anybody who has access to the list where the dimensions have been added. In the case of the matrix reporting that I'm showing you now, that is, as soon as you purchase the license, you would be giving access to your users through standard PopDoc security. All right, good job adding questions as we go through, folks. I like this. Keep me on my toes. As I was saying, with the matrix report here, obviously you can use the dimensions in different ways here. I just chose to use my one dimension across the top to kind of show those summaries and get a total for each of my GL accounts. Now, I focused on general ledger as I'm going through with each of my examples. Obviously, anywhere where dimensions exist, all of this stuff that I'm showing you applies. So if I was looking at a list of sales transactions, again, I have access to all the dimensions within that. So let's take a look within PopDoc itself for how do we do some of this? How do we get dimensions into our lists? How do we, add the details, all of that jazz. So I'm going to jump over here to PopDoc, and obviously I jumped ahead while I was preparing for this particular demo. And I am going to go straight to my connector. So I'll go to my Business Central connector, Yes, we have many, many connectors in our environments. Okay. Now, where it started was, how do I get dimensions onto my list? So if I go to my general ledger entries, which was the list I was looking at, and hit my pencil. Now, what I will tell you is when you first set up your Business Central connection, um, assuming it was within the past year and a half or so, um, all of the lists that have dimensions available, we would have already created the link to the dimensions for you, and we would have pulled in all of the valid dimensions. If you've had a Business Central connector for longer than that, or if you've created a new list, or you just find yourself with a list that doesn't have dimensions on it, it's wicked easy to add those. So I can just go to my field section here. I'm going to click on my add up at the top, and I'm going to add dimensions. Now, the way dimensions work in Business Central is there's something called a dimension set ID that is saved with every record, right? So what you're going to do is within the list that you're trying to add onto, you're going to choose what is that dimension set ID field called. Now, you might have a list where maybe you've joined the customer list to the sales order header list or something like that. Now, each of those would have their own dimension set ID. So you're going to choose which dimension set ID you're choosing in this particular field. Now, this is the answer to that question from earlier. So Cheryl, you asked, how do I show the value as opposed to the dimension? Here I'm going to choose either the description or the code itself. And you could add both separately. So you could have one dimension field that you've added that is showing the code, one dimension field that you're adding that is showing the description. Okay, and then you're going to choose which dimensions you want to include. So I may not want to include test SC1 and test SC2 because my Smart Connect developers don't necessarily need those values to be added to my list. I'll just leave them checked for now so I don't break stuff for those Smart Connect developers. But this is the gist of it. Once I hit add, those dimensions will be added to my list. And now, sort, filter, group, all of those cool things that I showed you in that GL transactions list, that's all possible. And what was that, like 30 seconds of no code? It's pretty easy. And I was talking the whole time. So that's our first part of what I showed you there. Oh, okay. We are going to go back to the list because there's actually two things I completely forgot to show you. I got so excited to show you the matrix that I didn't show you a couple other ways that you could view the data within that list. So we're going to go back to that in a minute. But for now, what I want to talk about is, if you remember, I showed you those details at the side of my accounts list. So what features did I employ to do that? And I will tell you, it was very, very quick. So the first thing I did was within my connector, I created a couple of custom lists. These were called summary lists. So here's my customer group summary is the one that I did to get the customer group. It is a summary list that is reading from my general ledger entries. The only fields I have, I'm grouping by customer group and GL account number, and I'm including the amount field, okay? Super, super easy to set that up. Now, the other one looks exactly the same, except it says product instead of customer group. Then what I did, I went to my standard accounts list. I went to, you're going to be shocked by this, my details section to add a detail. So the first one I added, when I clicked up here, I added a custom detail. Then I selected basically that custom list that I just created, the customer group summary. I did put a filter in place to assign it based on GL account number. And then I just chose the two fields. What was the customer group being shown and what was the sum of the transaction amount, right? So this all to set that up probably took 10 minutes or so, but it does give me that information on the side. Okay. The last thing is maybe a little bit more advanced. We do have training available for this, but I do want to show you the gist of how did we create that matrix report, right? So I've got, it was this one here, my month to date by product dimension. Now, the way a matrix report works, when I go in, I first identify what are my columns. Now, in my case, when I added my columns, the option was generate filter columns. And what that does, you point it at a field, right? In my case, I chose the product dimension field. And it reads all the values in there and creates a column for each value that I can now add to my list. The other thing that I added here was a total. Where are you? Oh, a summary column. And then what that summary column is doing is giving me that total at the end of my grid. If you remember, I had, that was my last column there. And then I also added an account as a label. Now, what that means is when I get to my rows and I choose account as my row, which is what I did, and I set that up. This is going to take a second because it's reading some data. Okay, under here, I just tell it I want the GL account number to be my label so that if you remember when we were here, I'm showing my GL account number here, and I just chose specific columns that I wanted to show before I showed my total. Okay, also within this, just so everybody knows, full disclosure, I did restrict this to specific GL accounts using my restriction here because there's only a part of my chart where I knew I had dimensions set up. And so this is what I did to save myself from having to scroll through a whole bunch of values in front of viewfind people. So in a nutshell, that's what our matrix report looks like. And that's how you would kind of go through the process of setting one up. Again, this really only took a few minutes for me to do. You go, once you've selected create a matrix report, it really doesn't take that long. One note that I'll throw out there for all of you folks who are doing it is security. Do make sure that as you're creating these new objects, you're maintaining your security as you go through. Now, I promised you a moment ago, there were two things that I forgot to show you on my transaction list. So I would like to go back and show you those. Let me go to my financial, back to my general ledger entries. Okay, so I showed you sort group filter, I showed you multi-company. All of that kind of just makes sense. What we didn't talk about was the views. So we've got under the word list, a lot of you may not have ever clicked on this, but under this word list, we've got a couple other words. Now, text doesn't apply to what we're talking about today, but cards and charts certainly could. So what cards allow me to do is group my entries in pretty much a Kanban board. Now, kind of weird looking at this from a general ledger perspective, but if I was looking at, sales transactions and I wanted to group them based on, line of business or, how, where did I get those? Was it from this online store, that online store, or walking around the mall with a pen and paper? So what I can do here is I can actually group my columns based on whatever I want. So I could, again, go back to my product column here, choose that. And now what I've got is a column of transactions per group, right? So per, in my case, product. I can minimize those if I really want to. I can maximize them to see more data here. So again, this is just a way for me to view my data that's a little bit different from what I've seen in the past. Again, that can be multi-company. I can be adding columns, all the stuff. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you was a chart. Okay, now you guys, anyone who's watched me teach this in the past, you know that we're not trying to compete with Power BI. We work very well with Power BI, but sometimes I do like to, as maybe as a detail, dress up a report by including a simple little visualization. So here I can change this, for example, to maybe we'll make it a bar chart. I haven't done a donut in a minute. Instead of that, I can do it based on my department dimension. Instead of the count, I can make it a sum. My value field will be on amount. Okay. And then, I have all these choices. So I can have labels in place and know that sales, administration, and production are making up all of my journal entry transactions. In this case, I can even show you the amounts on them. So what is each department contributing to my list of journal entries? Again, I can take this, I can save it as a favorite if I want to. So once I'm happy with my settings, I'm going to click here, save the changes to my favorite, or maybe save this one as a new favorite so I don't completely overwrite my demo favorite. And then I could use that if I wanted to as a dimension, or not a dimension, we're talking about dimensions. I could use that as a detail on any other list and give people a pretty little picture. Okay, so what we've shown you here is how you can use dimensions in a standard list, some of the features with those. We've shown you a bunch of different views that you can use for that data. We've shown you how to use it as a detail, and we've talked about matrix reports. So the settings to add the dimension description. So when I was originally adding that dimension, so let me go back to what list am I on here? Let me just go back to my main list. So my general ledger entries list, for example, when I went to fields, I clicked on add and I chose add dimensions. I chose which dimension set ID field I wanted, and I chose whether I was displaying the description or the dimension code. So it's part of when I'm adding that dimension field, it's contained within that configuration there. And then I'm choosing, once I've chosen whether it's description or code, which dimension specifically I want to include in this list. All right. So that was a nice quick one for today. Like I said, we showed you some real power for the 15 minutes that you spent listening here. Well, I guess it was 25. I apologize. I must have blanked out for 10 of those minutes. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to reach out. Our help desk team are always happy to answer questions. Rod O'Connor at e1solutions.com would be myself. We do have a customer experience team who you may have dealt with up until now. They're also happy to answer questions. Cheryl, maybe what we'll do is reach out to you separately and we'll take a look. It may be a security thing. You may not have access to be able to do that. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. As I mentioned, please feel free to reach out. My name is Rod O'Connor, and we'll all talk soon.